Hello once again, and this week we're reading the Parsha of Savo. The first section of the Parsha of Savo is the Parshas HaBikurim, the section where the Torah tells us of the mitzvah of bringing the Bikurim. The Torah says, "V'haya Savo el aretz," and it will be when you enter the land. Asher Hashem Elokecha nosein lecha nachla l'rish v'nachala. Hashem will give you as an inheritance. V'rishta, you'll take possession of it. V'yashafta ba, and you'll live there. So then the Torah says, "V'lakachta me reishis kol pri ha'adama." You shall take of the first of the fruit of the ground, and you'll end up bringing it. You'll put it in a basket. V'halachta l'makom she'yivcha Hashem Elokecha l'shakein shmo Hashem. You'll bring it to Yerushalayim. The Medrash says, the Sifri says, B'schus, and that's right over here on our sheet, B'schus mitzvah zu, in the schus of the mitzvah of Bikurim, tikansu la'aretz, you're going to enter the land. Well, the kasha is obvious. The Ramban asks the obvious kasha. Viksha Ramban, and this piece that we're doing here comes from Rav Meir Shapiro in his Sefer on Chumash called Imrei Das, but he quotes the Ramban, and he says, Viksha Ramban, da'adayim lo nischayvu kodem shenichnesu. He says, it doesn't make sense. You're not chayiv to bring Bikurim until you enter the land. But the Medrash says, in the merit of the mitzvah, that enter the land. It doesn't work that way. Menira. So, Rav Meir Shapiro is going to give the following answer. Menira, al pi de isa b'sfarim HaKadoshim, Sfarim HaKadoshim teach us, the mitzvahs Bikurim hi tikun l'chet hameraglim. The mitzvah of Bikurim comes to be misakein, to fix up, to counteract, so to speak, the chet of the meraglim. Why? The chetam shemeraglim haya sheratzu lahachnis b'nei Yisrael eretz Yisrael kanisa b'derech hateva. The meraglim, what was the purpose of the meraglim? Okay, the purpose of the Meraglim, and one view of the Meraglim was that Klal Yisrael was living on a level of Lamala min hateva. They're being given mun every day to eat. They're drinking from the Mea Be'er. They don't have to work. They're surrounded by the Anani HaKavod. But they know that they're going to enter the land of Eretz Yisrael. And once they're there, they're going to have to plow the land and plant and go to work, and there's no more mun coming down. And so the Meraglim did not want to do that. The Meraglim wanted to live al pi l'mala min hateva. They didn't think they would be able to survive al pi derech hateva. But you'll see more as Rav Meir Shapiro goes on. Chetam shemeraglim hayu sheratzu lahachnis es b'nei Yisrael eretz kanisa b'derech hateva. They felt that we had to go b'derech hateva. V'amru tova aretz, and the land is great, but al pi teva, nature, efres ki az ha'am, the people who live there are very strong. V'halo ma'bakach im Hashem yigzor omer v'yakam hayad Hashem tiktzor. And even though Hashem said, you think HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't, even though they are very strong, there was no denying the strength of the indigenous population of the land of Canaan. But you don't think it's beyond the possibility that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could help them, help Klal Yisrael? El shadamu ki gam ma'amad Yisrael hu b'derech hateva. So they felt that Klal Yisrael wouldn't be able to survive in Eretz Yisrael al pi derech hateva. They didn't think Klal Yisrael could do that. But Bikurim, however, what is the mitzvah of Bikurim? Hichrizu Yisrael al hepach. When the Jews bring the mitzvah of Bikurim, you're announcing just the opposite. Shagam pri aretz kodesh Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. He ran the world when he gave you man, which was one level of Lamala min hateva, but he's also running the world even in Eretz Yisrael, which is enclosed in Teva. And when we being Bikurim, we are acknowledging that it's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not Mother Nature. There's HaKadosh Baruch Hu running the show. The Gam Havidu Hayakach. And that is exactly what we're supposed to say, as the Parsha tells us. There's a viduya, a confession that's said, a statement that the person who brings the bikurim has to say. Basi el aretz asher nishba Hashem lavaseinu laseilanu. I came to the land that Hashem gave us. V'razeh pella. He says, I want to show you how direct this idea is. He says, I want to show you. Rav Meir Shapiro says, look how this fits in. Look in the Mishnah in Maseches Bikurim, Perek Gimel Mishnah Aleph, what the Mishnah says. What does the person do who's bringing the Bikurim to Yerushalayim? Ketzad mafrishim Bikurim. How do you separate the Bikurim? What do you do when you want to get the Bikurim and then bring them up to Yerushalayim? So the Mishnah tells us, Yored Anu Matoch Sadehu, he goes into his garden, to his field, V'roeh Te'ena Shebichra, and he sees a fig that has blossomed, that is becoming ripe. Eshkol Shabachar, a cluster of grapes that is ripening. Rimon Shabachar, or a pomegranate that is ripening. So what does the farmer do? Kosher begemi v'omer bikurim. He takes a rope, a type of rubber, type of string, and he wraps it around the first fruits that he sees growing, and he announces, "Harei elu bikurim." These are the bikurim. Shanu chachamim b'lashon Mishnah shlosha peros. What fruits does the Mishnah mention? Hainu te'ena eshkol v'rimo. Figs, grapes, and pomegranates. Why dafka with those three fruits mentioned? Oh, says Rav Meir Shapiro. Do you remember back in Parsha Shlach the story of the Meraglim? What does the Torah tell us? What fruits did they bring back? Which they were, as the word he uses, is makalkel, that he, they did negative things. They came to Nachal Eshkol. Those were the fruits that they cut down and they brought back to show the quote-unquote abnormality of Eretz Yisrael. Dafka, those fruits that were brought back by the Meraglim are the ones that the Mishnah says the examples for Bikurim. Zel umazeh asalakim. V'zeh mechuvim b'divrei Chazal hanal. And that is the idea that the medrash that we began with is talking about. Us asay mitzvah zu, do this mitzvah, shebishvila tichnesu la'aretz. Because of it, you'll be able to go into the land. Kihu tikkun oso achet shal yidei nisafku b'midbar. They wanted to stay in the midbar. They didn't want to leave L'malam and Ateva because they didn't think Klal Yisrael could live L'malam and Ateva in Eretz Yisrael. It was Al Pi Teva. It was only natural. Comes along the mitzvah Bikurim and says, I want to show you everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even when you're living in, again, Al Pi Derech Ateva, you have to realize it all comes from Ribono Shalom. Ukin medumani od. And he says, I think even more, says Rav Meir Shapiro. He says that in the future there's a concept of before the coming of Mashiach ben David, there will be Mashiach ben Yosef, as the Gemara in Sukkah tells us. And what does that mean? Ki Yehoshua v'kolev lo haya ba'atzas meraglim. The two meraglim that did not participate were Yehoshua and Kalev. The other 10 did. Yoshua hayom Shevet Yosef, and Yoshua was from Ephraim, ultimately from Shevet Yosef. The Kalev mishevet Yehuda. The Kevan Sheshnei Ela Lohaya Be'etza Shalikav Aretz Zachulu Train Mashiach. Because these two people, Kalev and Yoshua, from those two Shvatim, did not participate in the Chet HaMeraglim. Their descendants are Zochet to be the future Mashiachs, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. And that's what the pasuk says back in Sefer Breshis. Vayigash elav Yehuda ki Yosef amar le'echav meraglim atem. Yehuda approaches Yosef, and he is going to now confront Yosef because Yosef accused his brothers of being Meraglim, spies. L'chein nigash elav Yehuda. So it was Yehuda who said, we're not spies. Ki hu lo haya bazeh. He wasn't one of the Meraglim at all. Zemasha Amma b'Medrash, and that's what the Medrash says on that pasuk of Avigash elav Yehuda. Shashvatim ramu malachim midyanim im elo melo. Two kings are fighting each other. Yehuda and Yosef are fighting, or Yehuda and Yosef, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef, Ehainu Kihane Trey, these two, Yosef, Yehuda, Trey Malcha Yisrael, the two kings of Israel, so to speak, Ba'asid in the future, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, because it's all a tikkun of what happened at the Chet HaMerag. So Meir Shapiro, the beginning of the parsha. Now, when the person brings his bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash, he has, as we just mentioned a moment ago, a vidui to say, a declaration to say, and we're all familiar with much of what he has to say because it's been incorporated as the Haggadah Shel Pesach. And one of the psukim that we say in the Haggadah, and one of the psukim that the person bringing the bikurim says is, Vanitzak el Hashem Elokei Avoseinu, and we cried out to Hashem, our God, God of our forefathers, Vayishma Hashem es kolenu, and Hashem heard our voice, Vayar es anyenu, and he saw our affliction, Ves amalenu, and our travail, the Yes Lachatzenu, and our oppression. And that, again, is a pasuk we're all familiar with from the Haggadah, and it's a pasuk that's recited as someone brings bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash. The Chavetz Chaim al Torah takes this pasuk and teaches us a tremendous lesson. The Chavetz Chaim writes in the Chavetz Chaim al Torah, Vayishma es tfilaseinu lo ne'amar. If you look, it doesn't say Vayishma es tfilaseinu, that God heard our prayers. What does it say? It says Vayishma Hashem es kolenu, he heard our voices. What's the point? Says the Chavetz Chaim. Vayishma es tfilaseinu lo ne'amar, Vayishma Hashem es kolenu, lamdenu, but it's coming to teach us. Shetzrichim litzok b'kol be'es tzara. In order for HaKadosh Baruch to hear our tefillos, we have to scream. We have to do it b'kol. Vanitzak, we scream to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then, Vayishma Hashem es kolenu, he'll hear our voices, literally. It doesn't say he'll hear our prayers or supplications. It says he'll hear our voices. And we have to scream b'kol with our voices, be'es tzara. Val Yedezeh, says the Chavetz Chaim, Val Yedezeh, Ona Hashem Teichem. God will immediately answer us. The af, and even though Kilapamim Ona Hashem b'meshach yomim afilu kamashanim, maybe the response to your tefillah, to your kol, will not be immediate. It'll be a couple of days, a couple of years. Kidis b'medrash, yesh tefillah l'kamashanim. There's some, the medrash says, there's some tefillos that will not be answered instantaneously, immediately, but it will take a while for the tefillah to be answered. Aval hatza'aka b'kol mo'elis. But when you raise your voice, that helps, which is an important lesson. We always read this parsha during the month of Elul, prior to the Yomim Noraim, and therefore one of the ways to daven is daven b'kol. Daven b'kol, out loud. But iko levakesh ala klal kulo, levakesh achrei kiyama mitzvah. He says, first of all, we have to ask on the generalization. We have to ask for everyone. And we do it after we do a mitzvah, like we do after, like we say harachamans after we did the mitzvah birchas hamazon. The mitzvah birchas hamazon are 4 brachos, 3 min Torah and 1 min derabanan. The first bracha is, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the first bracha is Barchas Hazan, that was written, the Gemara tells us in brachas, by Moshe Rabbeinu. The second bracha, Noda Lecha, was written by Yehoshua as they came into the land. The bracha of Bnei Yerushalayim, written by David and Shlomo. And the fourth bracha, which was established in Yavne after the Haruge Beitar, who were killed by the Romans about 60 some odd years after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. But after we finish the mitzvah of Birchas Hamazon, we have a whole list of harachamans. Hashem should have mercy upon us. We do that after we have the mitzvah of Birchas Hamazon, because when we daven and we do things out loud, HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers our tefillos. On the footnotes at the bottom of the Chavetz Chaim al Torah, on this, the Chavetz Chaim writes as follows. The person who put it together told us the following idea from the Chavetz Chaim. Hu haya omer. The Chavetz Chaim would always say, follow along this. Chazal miyatzim. Chazal always gave advice. Shekim mispalim avur a chola. When we daven for a chola, Rachmana litzlan, lo aleinu, lechololo b'soch klal Yisrael. It has to be a general tefillah. In other words, we don't just daven. We could, but we shouldn't, says the Chavetz Chaim, only daven for a single individual, but we should daven for a single individual amongst the Cholei Klal Yisrael. We generalize our tefillah. B'soch sha'ar Cholei Yisrael. The gam, not only when we daven for someone who is ill, but also when, again, lo aleinu, we go to be menachem avel, to nichem avelim, we say, es ha'avel betoch sha'ar avelei tzion v'Yerushalayim. We're not only being menachem the person who's in avelus now, but we include him or her, betoch sha'ar avelei tzion v'Yerushalayim. All the other avelim who are mourning, and they're mourning Tzion in Yerushalayim. Ki oz ha-tefillah miskabelas bihoser. That's the trick to get your tefillah answered quicker. V'ya mesaper ma shekara lagon Reb Shlomo Kluger sheniskabed b'sandach bris mila. And the Chavetz Chaim would tell the following story that happened with Reb Shlomo Kluger when Reb Shlomo Kluger was honored to be a sandak at a bris. Hagon ba b'zman ha-miyuah. The Gon, Reb Shlomo Kluger, came at the appointed time. He was told to come at a certain time for the bris. They said, we're not going to do the bris right away. You got to wait a few minutes. He came, but they told him we're not going to do the bris right away. So he said, what's going on here? Why are we delaying the bris? And they explained to him, the father, Rachmana litzlan, of the newborn baby is very sick. He's on his deathbed. So we're waiting, and so they decided to wait to perform the bris because we know that his death is imminent. And they want to be able to name the baby after his father. So they're going to wait for him to die, and then they will perform the bris. Again, ba'oso habayis nimtza b'matzav shel gesisa. There is a person on his deathbed. Avi harach hanola, the father of this newborn child. Vakrovim, and the relatives chiku li'tzias nishma. So they're waiting for him to unfortunately pass away. Kidei, for what purpose? Sheyuchlu likro asarach hanimo b'shem aviv, if they want to give him the name of his father. Kishashama es agon Reb Shlomo es adavar hamuzar hazeh. When Reb Shlomo Kluger heard this very, very outlandish, crazy reason for postponing the bris, tziva lamola molas ayela teka. He told the mol, we're not waiting another second. I want you to give this child a bris right now. Nichnas ba'atzmo lechola b'birchas mazel tov. And Reb Shlomo Kluger, after the bris, went into the person's room, the father's room, to wish him a mazel tov on the bris of his child. The koamar, and this is what he said: Lahatrich es hamalach hamamuna ala refuah sheyavo b'meyuchad l'rafos zachola ein b'kochi. He says to be matriach, to delay the malach who is appointed on refuah, that he should come to heal you. I don't have the ability to try to find out and get the malach to heal you. Avol kishenasasek b'mitzvahs mila. But I know that if we would be involved in the mitzvah of mila, yavo malach habris lamo lemina mo l'rapes rachanimo. I know that the Malach HaBris is going to come. And what is the purpose of the Malach HaBris? Or one of the purposes of the Malach HaBris? He's standing next to the mole, and as soon as the mole performs the Milah, he heals the baby. So I'm going to ask the Malach HaBris to go into the next room and heal the chola. We're going to do a mitzvah, and we do the mitzvah, there'll be a zechus. And that's exactly what happened, the Chavetz Chaim said. Lacher shlosha yamim kol hacholim mitasa v'holach beraglo bebeis hakneses. Reb Shlomo Kluger was right. They performed the bris. He went in and said Mazel Tov. He said, I had no ability to find the malach a refuah, but I had the ability to summon the malach habris. We summoned the malach habris who healed the child and ultimately healed the father, and the father was healed, no longer was at death's door. He even got up and he was able to walk to shul. Chavetz Chaim on the pasuk of Vanitzak el Hashem, we cry out, Vayishma Hashem es kolenu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should hear our voice. The Parsha of Ki Savo, as you all know, includes within it the Tochacha, the terrible rebuke, the unbelievable curses that will, Rahmana litzlan, occur to Klal Yisrael if they don't keep mitzvahs. One of the psukim that it says in the Tochacha is the following pasuk. It says, I'm sorry, this is not part of the Tochacha. This pasuk is in the Brachos, but its mirror image, so to speak, is found in the Tochacha. It says in the Parsha, Unesancha Hashem l'rosh v'lo l'zonav, and Hashem will make you as a rosh, as a head, but not as a tail. HaKadosh Baruch Hashem should put you as a head and not as a tail. What does that mean? What does that mean? Hashem should make us a head and not as a tail. So comes along Rav Shimshon Pinkas, and he says as follows. He says, one of the brachos that will happen to us, that should occur to us when we keep the mitzvah is, as the pasuk says, Unesancha Hashem l'rosh v'lo l'zonav. Hashem will make us as a head and not as a tail. Inyan zeh, this concept of being a head and not a tail, motzim anu gam b'Rosh Hashanah. We see a concept like this also in Rosh Hashanah in a couple of weeks. But Leil Rosh Hashanah, on the night of Rosh Hashanah, Minhag Yisrael lechol macholim b'Torah simanim l'shana tova. We have the custom to eat the foods that we call simanim, that are foods which are somewhat of an omen for the coming year. Okay, we dip an apple in honey, we eat pomegranates, and one of the foods that we have a custom to eat is the echad me'amhu she'ochlim rosh shel dag. We eat the head of a fish. The omrim, and we say, what is the yehi ratzon that we say? Yehi ratzon sheni el rosh v'lo l'zana. We should be a head and not a tail. Adam shu rosh, somebody who is a head, a rosh, zoche b'din Rosh Hashanah. He will merit a proper din on Rosh Hashanah. Let's understand this. Ma muhamuvan shal bakashazu. What does it mean? Shani el rosh v'lo l'zana. Think about it. You should be a head and not a tail. What does the Torah mean when he gives us that? When they give us that bracha, Torah gives us that bracha. And what does it mean on Rosh Hashanah night when we're eating the head of the fish? We should be a head and not a tail. Ma mishane adam hu rosh l'zana. What does that mean? A guy's a head and not a tail. What's pshat? Nachon, right? Harosh yachol lalechas l'chol makom sheyirtzeh. A head can go wherever it wants. A head can go wherever it wants. But the tail is dragged behind it. The tail doesn't have a mind of its own. It follows the head. Ach besofer shel davar. But in reality, you're right. So the head goes first, and the tail has to follow. But the bottom line is, both can end up in the same place. So instead of saying I should be a head and not a tail, it should be the bracha that we should able to go to a good place, not a bad place, because ultimately the tail is going to end up in the same place as the head. Nira, he says, I think as follows. There's a certain specific point that's being made here that we should dafka be considered a rosh, a head. And what is that? When we use the term head, what do we mean? What's the idea behind you should be a head? Person who has a head, and we use that term even in English. He's got a good head on his shoulders. What does that mean? He's got brains. Koach hisbonenus, the ability to think, to observe, to contemplate. Shal yadahu bochein v'kovei advarim. He's able to think and to figure things out. He's able to use the intelligence that the Ribono Shalom gave him. Mashein kein hazana, but the tail ain't lo seichel. Ain't bo das lahachnu the whole dvarim. He has no ability to make decisions and to come up with any ideas. Adam yachol yosad gomer. Person could be a tzaddik, complete tzaddik. Avalim huzanav. But if he's a tail, he has no thinking ability, no ability to use his seichel, kemat ve'ere'erev chutzid kasa, then he's almost worthless. He could be a person who is a good person, but if he's not able to independently think, nebuch, what can we say? Adavar misbate b'harbe nekudas b'chayim. We see this concept in many points of life. Yeshnam anashim shem gorim v'yishein. Shem gorim. There's some people who are leaders. The Yeshnam anashim shem nigrarim. And there's some people who are followers. In life, there are leaders and there are followers. Mashal rakeves ba'al kronos rabin. Think of a train with many, many, many different cars in the train. You see a train, right? You're at a railroad crossing, you see a train. Do you know if the train is being pulled or is the train being pushed? Sometimes they put the locomotive in the front. Sometimes they put the locomotive in the back. So this train, is it being pushed or is it being pulled? Maybe the bottom last car is pushing everything. When you break up the train, when you disconnect the different cars of the train, so the locomotive keeps going, and the rest don't go. So you see that the engine keeps going, and the cars that are still attached, but the ones that are behind it aren't going anywhere. It's possible, says Rav Shimshon Pincus, listen to this. It's possible that a person will end up after 120 years, and he'll be interrogated in the Beis Din Shel Ma'ala, and he'll be able to say, you know something? I knew all of Shas. V'sham yomulo, but you know what they're going to say to him? They're not going to test him on his knowledge. They're going to say to him, Eincha elazana, but you were only a tail. Lola marata machmas ishiyusach. You didn't learn for your own personality. You didn't learn for your own, you didn't add anything positive into the learning. It went along with the crowd, but you didn't add anything individual. All Jews are individuals. All people have the ability to add and to enhance themselves and their environment. But a person who doesn't do that, who just goes with the flow, nebuch, that's what a zana is. Adam chai b'toch misgeres u'misragel l'tzuras hachayim. A person lives in a certain realm and he becomes used to his life. And he is in the area that's familiar to him, and this is his lot in life. And it doesn't make a difference for some people whether he did it himself or he just got it from the environment. If it's his friend who's the leader, he's the head. Or I'm doing what they did yesterday. I'm following along the trends of yesterday. If a person follows his friends or he's following what was done yesterday, that's what the Torah means. He's a zana. He's a tail. He's not taking any initiative on his own. He's only doing what it says around him and what's happening around him and what the local trend is in the time. Chassam Sofer once is quoted in one of the tshuvas to say, "Kosev ala Chasidim shanago lilbosh rak bigdei meshi." He commented on Chasidim who wear silk clothing below bigdei tzemer. They don't wear wool clothing. She'amnam hador rishon asu zos machma shechashu l'shatnes. Why did certain group of Chasidim change to silk clothing? Because they were nervous about shatnes, and if they had wool clothing, there might be some linen threads or something like that within the clothing. So in order to avoid any chashash of shatnes, which by the way is also in this week's parsha, they changed over to wearing silk and not wool. So that was the generation who did it. Okay? But the second generation is not doing it because of the mitzvah not to wear shatnez. They're doing it because my father wore silk clothing. I'm wearing silk clothing because my father wore silk clothing. Not because I don't want to do the mitzvah. I want to avoid the mitzvah of wearing I want to avoid wearing shatnez and I want to fulfill that mitzvah. That's why I'm wearing the silk. No, I did it because that's what my father wears. Hador Harishon Hayaharosh. They were the leaders. Took the initiative. The next generation is within the realm of being a zana, the tail. They are followers. They're not leaders. Doesn't matter where it comes from. If it's not your own individuality, if you're not an initiative, then that is not a rosh. That's a zana. That's a tail. Rosh, when we say rosh, perusho sha'adam chai im she'ifos. A person lives with aspirations, with goals, with looking forward. Yesh la'koach yitziro uvinera. He has the ability to create. He has the ability to build. He has the ability to do unbelievable things, to be original. His originality. And he's involved in building his personality, building himself up. Who calls man mishtadel l'shanos nekudos nafsho? He's constantly trying to change. He's constantly trying to improve himself. He's constantly trying to reach different levels, different aspirations. Again, a wonderful idea for the month of Elul. Lahasmid Yosef, to learn more. L'spal Yosef b'kavana. He doesn't want to do just what he's been doing all the years. He wants to be better. He wants to be a rosh. He doesn't want to be a zana. A person could learn tremendous sedarim, put in a lot of time in learning basmada. His chafos, because he's drifting achrei havira tzibur shemisaviv, because he's following the trend, right? Everybody goes to the base medrash at night, so I'm doing it too. Lo kol she'ifos atzmius v'kivon shel binyan ruchni. He's not doing it because he wants to do it. He does it because that's what everybody in the neighborhood does. So I'm doing it too, but not because I want to build myself up. Ube'emes, and in truth, Rosh Hashanah, Shu Yom Shel Rosh. The Rosh Hashanah is the day that's ahead. Literally, it's the Rosh. Nesinas la'adam siyata d'shmaya meyuchedes le'eseks Rosh. On the day of Rosh Hashanah, we're given the siyata d'shmaya, the help from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to become a Rosh. Lowly higra acharei Roshim acherim, and not to follow other Roshim. But we become a Rosh ourselves. We become a head. We are praying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us the ability to have initiatives, to have aspirations, to have our own originality. He says, you want to be a zanav, so you could be a zanav for our rayos. What's our rayos with an aleph? A zanav for our rayos is the tail for lions. Who are the lions? Sure, we should follow the Gedolei Torah and the Gedolei Musar. To be with them and to help them do their task of leading the yeshivas and leading the community. So we should be their followers, no doubt about it. But with that, in addition to helping out the other leaders, you have to do something on your own. Yes, we have to be the tails for our leaders. That's true. The Rosh Yeshiva, the Rabbanim, the leaders, we're following them. But we also have to follow ourselves. Okay? You should break down our own midos of being used to what we're doing. And that will switch our abilities around, that we will ultimately be able to be a Rosh and not a Zanav. And that's the tefillah that we ask on the night of Rosh Hashanah. That is the tefillah that we ask, and that's what the bracha was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that if we listen to the mitzvos, we will be a Rosh and not a Zanav. At the end of the Tochacha, there's an interesting pasuk where the Torah says that the circumstances of our situation with the Golos will be so bad that Baboker Tomar Mitain Erev Uba Erev Tomar Mitain Boker, which means in the morning you will say if it will only be evening, and in the evening you will say if it will only be morning. That people would say that as Rashi says on that pasuk, he says, Shatsaros mischaskos tamid. The troubles are getting more intense constantly, and every curse is greater than before it, and therefore we're asking, if in the evening we want it to be morning already, and in the morning we want it to be evening, we want it to end. Chanan Wasserman, Hashem Yinkom Damo, who, as you know, was killed by the Nazis in 1941, in his sefer called Kovetz Agados, he comments on this pasuk, and this is what he says: Hanavim nibu. Hanavim nibu. The Nevi'im said prophecy, ki asida lavot tsar al Yisrael, that in the future there will be sorrows on Klal Yisrael. And again, remember who's writing this and when he's writing this. 1941. Hanavim nivu ki asida lavot tsar al Yisrael. The Nevi'im said prophecy that there will be a tzara that will come on Klal Yisrael, asher lo ira kamosa miyoma yeslangai, that they've never experienced from the time they were a nation. Hagon mi Vilna Kosev, the Vilna Gaon wrote in Evan Shlema, Yisurei Hagalos nimshal psukim l'tzar iber shalisha. The pain, the troubles, the travail of the Golos are compared in the psukim to pregnancy. Tsar ha'ibur shal ha'isha, the pain of a woman carrying a child. Kufas Chevlei Mashiach, and the period of Chevlei Mashiach, the period immediately preceding the coming of Mashiach, Nimshal Chevlei Leida, is like the birth pangs of a woman. the pain that she experiences immediately prior to giving birth. And just like you can't compare what pains and what discomfort the woman went through during the 9 months of pregnancy, you can compare once she goes into labor what those pains are like. They are incomparable. We can't compare what will happen, what has been happening over the 2,000 years of Golus to what will happen, what is happening or what will happen at the time of Chevle Mashiach. But Tkufa Zu, during this period, Hatzoros Yelchu v'Yachmiru miyom liyom, and in the period of Chevle Mashiach, the tzoros will be so awful and they'll get worse day by day by day. Again, I repeat what we said before. The Holocaust, Rav Elchanan Wasserman was slaughtered by the Nazis, shot with his yeshiva. Ba'boker tomar mi'iten erev shalafanav, as we quoted Rashi. In the morning, you'll say, it was much better last night because today it's worse. But Nosaf, even more, said Rabbi Chanan. The tzaras hagalus yesh seder yadua. We know that for the galus, there's an order for what will happen. Seder Zemarum is Parshas Galus, and you want to know what will happen in Galus? It's already hinted to in the Galus, in the Torah, in Parshas Vayishlach, which is the parsha that Chazal tell us that represents Galus. Sham Nemar, it says V'haya Hamachana Hanisha Lefleita, that when Yaakov Avinu went to encounter his brother Esav, he made sure to split up his camp, and he felt that if one would be destroyed, then the other one would be saved. Hamachane hanishar lefleita, would be a remnant, would be able to survive. All throughout our Golas, when they came on one nation, nimtzut tamid medina acheres shimsha lahem makom miklat. There was always a place as a refuge to go to. When the Jews were thrown out of Spain, they could go to Turkey. When the Jews were thrown out of one country, they were able to go to another country. There was never a worldwide pogrom upon the Jews. But as he says right here, but Kufas Gar Sfard, Paschu Turkey, Poland, Holland, and Sha'areim Lifnei Agolim. After the Jews were exiled in Spanish expulsion, so Turkey and Poland and Holland opened their gates for those remnants who were able to get out. But Kufas Chevle HaMashiach, however, when Mashiach comes, Rachmana Litzlan Lo Aleinu, says Rabbi Chanan Yacheres, Yehudim Yu Nir Dafim B'chol Makom. Jews will not have any place to go. But Ein Manoach, no place to put our feet down. Yegarshu Mikol HaMakomos V'lo Yechnisum La'af Echad. They will be chased from all directions and no place to go. And as the Torah says that when Yaakov Avinu brought his flock in front of Esav, the Torah says, "V'revach tasimu ben eder la'eder." He put space between each one of these flocks that he had. B'tkufas hagolus tinasein hafsakas nofesh ben gzeira l'gzeira. During Golus, there'll be a period of respite between each gezerah. It won't all come at once. However, Rachmana Litzlan b'meikvus of the Mashiach lo tifsakenu atzaros. They will not stop. They'll be coming and not stopping. Elatiana moshchos ubos kenohar. It'll be flowing like a river. Kasher roim shakzeros bos alo hefsek. When we see that the Gezeros and the terrible decrees are coming without stop, yesh ladas, you should know, ki Elohim chevle haleda shamula. Then this is the birth pangs and the geula is imminent. Kerogel etza chevle haleda, and as is normal when it comes to chevle haleda, ein ladas bebiram b'mayistaymo. You don't know when it's going to end. Is she going to be in labor for an hour, for 2 hours, for 15 minutes, or for 24 hours plus? Don't know. L'chein lo kein chevle leida shel klal Yisrael. Aleim huftach lanu. Kisofam leida mamish. This is a different nakuda. Yes, you don't know when it's going to be over, but you also don't know what will happen. Will the baby be born healthy? What will happen? We're waiting for a baby to come out. We don't know if it'll be a boy or a girl. We don't know if Rahman al-Islan, that there would be a problem with the child. There's always the unknown that will happen at the time of birth. But this birth of Chevle Leida, Lokein Chevle Leida Shel Klal Yisrael, that's not what will happen at the time of Chevle Leida of Klal Yisrael. Aleim Huftach Lonu Kisofim Leida Mamish. We know the end of the story. We know what will happen at birth. Ani Ashbir V'lo Oli Ramar Hashem. As the Navi writes, I will take care of you when you give birth, and the birth will be the period of Mashiach, and we know exactly what will happen when the period of Chevle Leida, of Chevle Mashiach is over, and we will have the circumstances of a new existence living in the Yemos HaMashiach. And our final offering for Parshas Kisavo comes from Chaim Kanievsky. The Torah tells us at the end of the Parsha, the Torah says that Moshe Rabbeinu told Klal Yisrael that you have been privileged to hear all these things. You saw everything that Hashem did in Eretz Mitzrayim to Paro and all his servants. He did Hamasas Agdolos Asharoinech Osos Amosim Agdolim Ahem, all the great trials that your eyes beheld, all the great signs and the wonders. Below Nasan Hashem Lachem Lev Ladas Veinam Luos Asayim Lishma Ada Yom Hazeh, and you really didn't get it until today. You have to understand what that means. Also needs hesper, but until now you really didn't get it. He says, I led you for 40 years in the Midbar. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I led you for 40 years in the Midbar. Your garment did not wear out, and your shoes did not wear out from your feet. Says Rav Kanievsky, says, I don't understand that. Raglecha, your shoes did not wear out from your feet. He says, I have a kasha on that. What do they need shoes for in the Midbar in the first place? Why would their feet wear out? They didn't walk at all. Chazal tell us that there were 7 clouds. There was one in the front, one in the back, one on the right, one on the left. That's 4. One up and one down. That's 6. And there was one that they walked on. Okay? One of the 7 was underneath them. Rashi, B'midbar Yud Lamed Aleph, B'kachi B'mechilta Shmos Yud Gimel Chaf Aleph. Amud Hayan Hayam Alichem Mahem. V'hem Alchu Acharav. K'mosh Kazabar Baloscha V'nal Amud Hanan. They were transported on the cloud. They didn't even need shoes. The Yesh Lomar, says Rav Chaim Kanievsky, because he has shas on his fingertips. He says there's Gemara Ksubas that tells us V'yesh Lomar de Mikol Malka Mitzvah K'tzas L'lechas. He had to walk a little bit. K'moshe Kazav Ksubas Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph Shish Behila. The Gemara there says it's not good to sit all the time. It's not good to stand all the time. You should sit a little bit, stand a little bit, and walk a little bit. You should walk. Shlish Behila. 1/3 you should do some walking. You should always take a walk. You should walk. Walking is good exercise. So the Gemara says that they had to walk. So that means they weren't transported on this moving cloud, but they actually had to walk. That's what they need shooters for. Ella shaha'anan siyalahem lolechas. But the cloud helped them walk. It was like a moving sidewalk. They were still walking, but it helped them move. And that's what it says, that your shoes didn't wear out and your feet were not didn't get ruined and bad things happened to your feet because they had to walk anyway, but the Ananim took care of you. That was why they needed shoes, and that is what the pasuk is teaching us here.